Hello there and welcome to Science for Sleep. Flowers may appear delicate, quiet, and effortless, but behind their beauty lies an ancient intelligence shaped by millions of years of evolution, and tonight, as you settle into rest, we drift slowly into this gentle world of petals, fragrances, light, and hidden biological wonders, letting every detail carry you deeper into calm. Flowers have always mesmerized us with color and scent, but their true story stretches far beyond what the eye can see. Each bloom is the result of survival strategies so refined that even the simplest field flower carries adaptations as complex as any engineered system. What looks fragile often hides remarkable strength, and what seems simple is built upon subtle sensory abilities that allow flowers to hear, respond, communicate, and adapt in ways most people never imagine. Even without ears, eyes, or a brain, a flower can detect vibrations in the air, changes in temperature, shifts in daylight, and chemical signals drifting through soil or wind. Some blossoms can hear the wing beats of bees, their petals acting like finely tuned acoustic receivers, trembling at just the right frequency when a pollinator approaches. And within minutes, the plant can adjust the sugar level of its nectar so the visitor receives a richer reward exactly when it arrives, saving energy at all other times. Other flowers wait patiently underground for years, especially in harsh deserts, where their seeds sleep beneath silent sand until the rare rainstorms arrive. Then, with sudden moisture, thousands of dormant seeds awaken together, rising, blooming, and completing an entire lifetime in just days before retreating back into hidden seeds for another unpredictable cycle. High in cold mountain regions, some alpine flowers have evolved the surprising ability to produce their own heat. By increasing metabolic activity deep inside their structures, they create a warm microclimate that protects their pollen from freezing and offers a cozy landing spot for cold insects whose sluggish bodies benefit from the gentle warmth, creating a tiny oasis of life in a world of frost and wind. Many flowers communicate through color, and some even change their color after pollination, shifting pigments from vibrant and inviting to dull and uninteresting, signaling to bees and butterflies that the bloom has already been visited and that newer flowers offer fresher nectar, saving pollinators time and protecting the plant from unnecessary damage. Beneath human vision lies another world entirely, ultraviolet patterns painted across petals like invisible runways, guiding bees straight to nectar through stripes, rings, and arrows we cannot see but insects read instantly. Some blossoms smell sweet and fruity, but others release the scent of rotting meat to attract flies and beetles that naturally seek decay. Their petals often mimic texture, color, and warmth of decomposing flesh so convincingly that insects crawl inside expecting a feast or a place to lay eggs, only to become unsuspecting carriers of pollen. Among the most astonishing floral strategies are those used by certain orchids, which imitate the bodies, textures, colors, and even chemical scents of female insects. Male insects, fooled into attempting courtship or mating with the flower itself, press against precisely placed pollen packets, unknowingly transporting them to the next orchid that imitates the same partner. Time, too, is measured with extraordinary accuracy by many plants, as internal clocks built from networks of genes respond to tiny changes in daylight duration, allowing flowers to open and close at specific hours, aligning their rhythms with pollinators, safety, temperature, and seasonal cycles. These time-keeping mechanisms allow some species to wait for the exact day length of spring or autumn, ensuring that their blooms appear not too early and not too late, but in perfect harmony with their ecosystems. Flowers also sense subtle changes in wind, temperature, and chemical signatures drifting from neighboring plants. When danger approaches, such as herbivores, pathogens, or extreme weather, many species release protective chemicals or alter their scent profile to deter threats or attract helpful insects that prey on pests. The chemistry of flowers is a quiet language that shapes entire landscapes. Signals drift from one plant to another, creating networks of communication that help communities survive together. Some flowers rotate throughout the day to follow the sun, maximizing warmth and light exposure. Others remain still but adjust how their petals reflect or absorb heat, moderating their temperature like tiny, natural thermostats. In tropical rainforests, towering canopy flowers rely on birds with specialized beaks, and their nectar is formulated to meet the nutritional needs of specific species, creating precise partnerships formed over countless generations. In grasslands, small wind-pollinated flowers release vast clouds of pollen into breezes that carry genetic messages far across open fields. Water plants use buoyancy and currents to deliver pollen, while some species trap small insects temporarily inside floral chambers, releasing them only once pollination is assured. Deep underground, bulbs and tubers store energy year after year, waiting for the right moment to rise again. Their roots sense moisture, nutrients, microbes, and even signals from neighboring plants. In forests where sunlight barely reaches the ground, shade-loving flowers adjust their pigment concentrations to absorb what little light filters through, turning scarcity into opportunity. In Arctic regions, blossoms grow in tight clusters that trap warm air, allowing insects to stay active longer and giving flowers more time for pollination despite short summers. Some flowers close at night or during rain, protecting pollen from moisture or conserving energy. Others open only at night, releasing powerful scents that lure moths navigating by moonlight. Many species rely on color combinations, shapes, textures, and fragrances that align with the sensory abilities of specific pollinators. A hummingbird sees brilliant reds and hovers before narrow tubular blooms, while bees prefer blues and yellows marked with ultraviolet signals. The coevolution between flowers and pollinators is a delicate dance, each influencing the other, shaping structures, behaviors, and timing across millennia. Even the way petals fold, curl, or unfurl follows patterns rooted in geometry, growth rates, and pressures inside cells, turning the simple act of blooming into a complex choreography of water movement, cell expansion, and structural tension. Flowers also defend themselves through thorns, toxins, bitter compounds, or sticky surfaces that deter herbivores. Others invite ants or protective insects to guard them. Underground, roots exchange nutrients with fungi in symbiotic partnerships that help flowers access water and minerals they could never reach alone. In return, the fungi receive sugars crafted through photosynthesis. Every part of a flower's life is interconnected with its surrounding world. Soil microbes shape growth, breezes carry scents, sunlight directs rhythms, and animals complete the cycles of reproduction. Even when petals fall and flowers fade, they nourish ecosystems through seeds that feed birds, pods that scatter across wind, fruits that sustain animals, and nutrients that return to earth as organic matter. For every blossom, there are countless unseen events, chemical pulses, microscopic interactions, cellular movements, working together to create the moment we perceive as simple beauty. Flowers also serve as environmental indicators. Changes in their blooming patterns reveal shifts in climate, rainfall, soil health, and pollinator populations. In many regions, scientists use flower timing to monitor the health of entire ecosystems. Despite their peaceful appearance, flowers endure constant challenges: drought, cold, heat, insects, disease, storms, and competition. Yet they continue to adapt, innovate, and bloom in the most unlikely places, from deserts to glaciers, from mountaintops to underwater meadows, from dark forests to sunlit plains. As you imagine these blossoms scattered across landscapes, opening with the sunrise, responding to the soft hum of bees, glowing with hidden ultraviolet patterns, warming their own centers in frozen air, or mimicking the scent of decay to lure unsuspecting visitors, feel your own mind soften and slow. Let the quiet intelligence of flowers remind you that strength does not always appear loud or sharp. Sometimes it is gentle, patient, and deeply attuned to the rhythms of the world. Tonight, as you rest, picture a single flower unfolding petal by petal, guided by light, warmth, sound, scent, and time itself. Imagine entire fields blooming after rain that arrives once a decade, or tiny alpine blossoms glowing with warmth in the cold wind, or orchids performing illusions so precise that insects become part of their strategy without ever understanding why. Allow the slow, natural artistry of this hidden world to settle into your breathing, loosening your thoughts and calming your body. Flowers ask for nothing, yet they offer color, fragrance, nourishment, life, and serenity to every creature around them. As you drift further into stillness, remember that the world is full of soft mysteries like these, quiet, patient, ancient, and endlessly beautiful, and for now, you do not need to solve anything. You simply rest, breathe, and let the gentle story of flowers guide you into sleep, one peaceful moment at a time. A fly or beetle enters, lured by scent or color, and then discovers that the exit routes have narrowed or closed, trapping it inside a living chamber designed with remarkable precision by the flower itself, a chamber lined with slippery surfaces, inward-pointing hairs, shifting petal positions, and subtle mechanical structures that make escape difficult until the plant decides the moment is right. As the insect struggles and crawls along the textured inner walls, it brushes against reproductive structures positioned to deposit or collect pollen with extraordinary accuracy, and after a set period, often timed to match the maturity of pollen or the readiness of stigmas, parts of the flower relax, soften, or change shape, opening pathways that allow the visitor to leave and unknowingly continue its role as a pollination courier when it enters another bloom of the same species, repeating a cycle in which the insect experiences a temporary inconvenience while the plant gains a far higher chance of precise pollen delivery, a relationship that seems effortless but is rooted in evolutionary mastery. Not all flowers rely on passive methods to distribute their pollen. Certain blossoms store their grains under tension like sharp springs or drawn bows waiting for the right moment to release, and instead of letting pollen drift gently on the breeze, these flowers pack their anthers with mechanical energy, holding their grains in tiny capsules or twisted structures that snap open only when triggered by a specific vibration, touch, movement, or even sound frequency produced by a visiting insect, causing pollen to shoot out in a brief, concentrated burst, forming pale yellow clouds that coat a pollinator or disperse through the air with far more force and efficiency than passive methods could achieve. In some species, specialized anthers twist or coil as they dry, storing elastic energy that springs free when the right level of dryness and movement align. This allows the plant to control the timing of pollen release with remarkable precision, minimizing waste and maximizing reproductive success, turning what appears to be a quiet, delicate bloom into a biological machine capable of launching pollen with purpose and power. In other parts of the world, some water flowers warm themselves like small furnaces, creating gentle heat inside their blooms even while floating in cold ponds, lakes, or marshes, and within the sheltered interior of their petals, tissues increase metabolic reactions in focused zones, releasing warmth that subtly elevates the temperature around the flower. This warmth helps volatile scents rise into the air more effectively, lifting their fragrance across still waters where breeze is scarce, allowing pollinators to detect them from greater distances. The warmth also encourages insects that would normally be sluggish in cool environments to land, explore, and move more actively, ensuring more efficient pollination, while the temperature difference, though slight to humans, influences the development of pollen and reproductive cells. By creating these stable pockets of warmth, aquatic plants engineer their own microclimates, protecting delicate processes from cold water and unpredictable weather. Some flowers reach beyond mechanics and heat, communicating with one another through airborne chemicals, sending faint messages that drift through the air when they open, close, bloom, or encounter stress. These messages consist of tiny molecular signals released from petals, leaves, or reproductive tissues, which neighboring flowers of the same species detect through specialized receptors, allowing them to adjust their timing, scent output, nectar production, or opening behavior even before environmental changes reach them directly. For example, when one plant suddenly finds itself shaded or surrounded by rising humidity, it may release a subtle chemical cue that tells nearby blossoms to prepare for similar conditions, creating coordinated responses across a cluster of plants, reducing waste, synchronizing pollination windows, and improving the chances that insects will arrive when nectar is at its peak. This chemical dialogue is silent and invisible but remarkably effective, turning a group of flowers into an interconnected network that adapts collectively despite being rooted in place, showing that communication is not limited to animals but thrives quietly among petals and stems. In the deep hours of night, a different group of flowers begins its work. Some blossoms bloom only after darkness falls, relying on moonlit pollinators such as moths, beetles, and nocturnal insects that navigate by scent, touch, and faint reflections rather than color. These night-blooming flowers remain tightly closed during the day to protect themselves from heat and conserve energy. But after sunset, their pale petals unfold, reflecting even the softest light of the moon or stars, making them glow gently in the shadows. Instead of producing bright pigments, they depend on rich, drifting scents that travel far through cool, dense night air and on nectar that becomes more concentrated after dusk, offering a rewarding meal to the few pollinators capable of finding them. Their timing is incredibly precise, with many opening shortly after dusk and closing again before dawn, carving out an ecological niche free from daytime competitors and turning darkness into their strategic advantage. Other flowers move in subtle ways during pollination, acting less like stationary structures and more like sensitive instruments responding to touch. Some blossoms bend, tilt, or shift when triggered by pressure or vibration from a visiting insect, adjusting internal parts to ensure that pollen sticks to exactly the right location on the visitor's body. Stamens swing inward with precision, petals press gently against tiny legs, or hidden lever-like structures release tension that reshapes the bloom in seconds. These movements, though almost imperceptible to the casual observer, dramatically improve the accuracy of pollination and prevent nectar thieves from taking rewards without performing their part. These floral motions form a choreographed dance between plant and pollinator, with mechanisms activated only under specific conditions, transforming the flower into a miniature living machine capable of dynamic response. In dense tropical forests where sunlight rarely reaches the ground, certain flowers grow not on branches but directly from tree trunks, a phenomenon known as trunk flowering or cauliflowery. Instead of reaching upward for the light, their blossoms emerge along thick bark surfaces or major branches, placing themselves directly into the pathways of animals that climb, perch, or walk along the tree trunks. Fruit bats, beetles, monkeys, and small mammals pass within centimeters of these blooms, making trunk flowering an efficient strategy for attracting pollinators in crowded, competitive environments. These blossoms may be large, strongly scented, or thick-skinned to survive frequent contact, and their fruits often develop on the trunk as well, supported by the strength of solid wood rather than delicate branches. This architectural adaptation transforms the entire tree into a vertical landscape of blooms and fruits, showing how flowers utilize the structure of their surroundings with remarkable creativity. Some plants take specialization to the extreme, forming symbiotic relationships with single species of pollinators. These flowers evolve shapes, fragrances, colors, and blooming schedules that perfectly match the behavior, body structure, feeding habits, or sensory abilities of one specific animal, ensuring highly accurate pollen transfer while locking out competitors. A floral tube may grow to match the exact length of one bird's beak or one insect's tongue. Anthers may sit at the perfect height to brush against only one species. Scents may mimic the preferred signals of a single pollinator. Although this level of specialization seems risky, it creates a reliable mutual bond in which the plant receives precise pollination and the animal enjoys an exclusive, dependable food source. Over generations, the plant and pollinator shape each other's evolution, forming a quiet interdependence seen nowhere else in nature. Beyond light, heat, and touch, some flowers can sense humidity, adjusting their fragrance output based on moisture in the air. When humidity rises, scent molecules travel farther and linger longer, so blossoms increase their fragrance release, allowing pollinators to detect them from greater distances. When conditions dry out, they conserve energy by reducing scent output. This fine-tuned response often aligns with the daily habits of pollinators that prefer flying only under certain moisture levels, allowing the flower to communicate more effectively with its visitors. Their ability to interpret moisture as a guiding signal reveals how closely plants interact with atmospheric conditions, responding not only to sunlight or temperature but to the invisible weight of water vapor drifting around them. Some flowers mimic dewdrops to lure curious insects, producing glossy bead-like structures or reflective patches on their petals that resemble fresh droplets of morning dew. Tiny insects searching for water or shiny surfaces land to investigate, and in doing so, brush against pollen or follow the curved architecture of the petals deeper into the flower. The dew-like structures may be made of specialized cells, concentrated oils, or transparent tissues shaped to catch light at the perfect angle. They do not evaporate like real dew and remain attractive throughout the day, offering a visual cue that plays on the instincts of insects accustomed to seeking moisture. This strategy is subtle yet effective, showing how flowers use illusion as easily as they use color, fragrance, and structure. All of these strategies, chemical conversations, nighttime blooming, mechanical traps, explosive pollen, trunk flowers, subtle movements, heating mechanisms, humidity sensing, and glittering dew-mimicking beads, reveal a world far more complex than the delicate surface beauty we often admire. Flowers are engineers, communicators, architects, chemists, timekeepers, illusionists, and survival strategists. Each bloom shaped by thousands of years of evolution into a living tapestry of intelligent responses, quiet adaptations, and intricate relationships with the world around them. Their lives unfold in silence, but their strategies speak loudly of resilience and ingenuity, forming a hidden universe beneath every petal, a universe where every movement has purpose, every scent has direction, every color has meaning, and every tiny shift contributes to the grand dialogue of nature. A fly or beetle enters, lured by scent or color, and then discovers that the exit routes have narrowed or closed, trapping it temporarily inside a chamber designed with quiet precision. Slippery surfaces, inward-pointing hairs, or shifting petal positions make escape difficult, and as the insect struggles and crawls, the walls lined with carefully placed reproductive structures brush pollen onto its body or collect grains it carries from previous visits, ensuring that the confusion it feels serves a purpose far older and more deliberate than the creature itself, and after a set period, usually timed to match the maturation of pollen or the readiness of the stigmas, parts of the flower slowly relax or change shape, releasing the insect and sending it onward to repeat the cycle in the next bloom it encounters, turning a brief inconvenience for the insect into a highly effective method of pollination. Some flowers go even further, releasing their pollen not as a passive dust but in tiny explosive bursts, storing mechanical tension like a drawn bow waiting for the slightest trigger, often a vibration of the precise frequency produced by a specific pollinator's wings or the light touch of a landing insect. And when this trigger arrives, the structure snaps open with sudden force, sending pollen outward in a concentrated cloud that coats the visitor far more effectively than a gentle breeze ever could. In other species, anthers twist or coil as they dry, building tension, until the moment conditions align, allowing the plant to control exactly when pollen becomes available, turning the delicate bloom into a miniature launcher that delivers its grains at the perfect time to the perfect recipient. In quiet ponds and still marshes, some water flowers possess an even more unusual trait. They warm themselves like tiny furnaces floating upon cold surfaces. Through active tissues deep within their blossoms, they raise their temperature just enough to change the microenvironment around them, radiating warmth that lifts scent molecules into the air and attracts sluggish pollinators made slow by cool conditions, enabling these flowers to manipulate their surroundings despite the chilling embrace of the water below. The heat they generate not only spreads fragrance more effectively across the stillness but also encourages insects to move energetically inside the bloom, improving pollination in an environment where cold would otherwise restrict vital biological processes. And in the air above these waters, certain flowers communicate silently with one another through drifting chemical messages, releasing faint molecular signals when they open, close, or experience stress such as sudden shade or rising humidity. Nearby flowers detect these airborne whispers, adjusting their scent output or timing in a coordinated response, forming a subtle communication network that helps conserve energy and synchronize with pollinators in a constantly shifting landscape, proving that even rooted organisms can exchange crucial information through the breeze. Some flowers choose to reveal their beauty only at night, opening under the softness of darkness and relying on moonlit pollinators instead of the bustling daytime crowds. Their pale petals reflect faint lunar light, forming gentle glows that guide moths and other nocturnal creatures who navigate by scent, touch, and dim reflections rather than bright color. As nighttime deepens, their fragrance strengthens, drifting far through the cool air. And their nectar grows richer, offering a concentrated reward tailored for creatures active when the world grows quiet. Their precise rhythm, opening after dusk and closing before dawn, protects delicate tissues from daytime heat and allows them to thrive in niches where competition sleeps. Other flowers move just enough to touch their pollinators at the perfect moment. They do not wait passively but shift internal structures the instant an insect applies pressure or vibration, swinging stamens inward, bending petals, or releasing tiny lever-like mechanisms that increase the accuracy of pollen placement, creating a choreography so subtle that human eyes scarcely notice it. Yet so effective that each visit becomes more productive than chance could ever allow. These mechanical responses, silent and precise, turn the flower into a small machine activated only under specific conditions, preventing nectar thieves from escaping without contributing and making sure every grain of pollen is used wisely. In the deep tropical forests where sunlight struggles to reach the ground, some flowers grow directly from tree trunks in a strategy called trunk flowering, placing their blossoms along sturdy bark rather than extending delicate stems toward the canopy. This unusual placement brings them into the direct paths of fruit bats, beetles, and climbing mammals that travel along the trunks, providing a reliable stream of visitors and allowing the tree to transform itself into a vertical garden of scents, colors, and interactions. The flowers and fruits that emerge from the trunk are often thick-skinned or strongly fragrant, built to withstand frequent contact and attract creatures that rarely look upward for food. There are species that forge deeply exclusive partnerships with single pollinator species, evolving shapes, scents, and timing that match one particular animal so precisely that no other creature can effectively pollinate them. The length of a floral tube might mirror the exact reach of a bird's beak or an insect's tongue. Anthers positioned to touch only one species in just the right place. And though such specialization seems risky, it ensures flawless accuracy and grants the pollinator a consistent food source in return, forming a mutual dependence refined through countless generations. In other cases, flowers can sense humidity and adjust their scent output to suit atmospheric conditions. When moisture in the air increases and scent molecules travel farther, the blossoms intensify their fragrance. But when dryness prevails, they conserve energy by reducing the release. These shifts often align with the behavior of pollinators that prefer certain humidity levels for flight, demonstrating that even subtle cues in the air guide the rhythms of blooming plants. Some flowers mimic dewdrops by producing glossy, bead-like structures on their petals, made of reflective tissues or wax layers that glimmer just like real droplets. In arid places where actual dew is rare, this illusion lures curious insects searching for moisture or familiar glints, drawing them deeper into the blossom where pollen transfer quietly occurs. The mimicry is stunningly effective because it plays on the instincts of creatures that navigate by tiny flashes of light. Others use electric fields to signal bees, shaping their surfaces and internal structures to produce faint electrical patterns that indicate whether nectar has been collected recently. Bees, sensitive to these charges, detect the subtle shift as soon as they approach, allowing them to choose the most rewarding flowers without wasting time. When a bee lands, it changes the flower's electrical field, sending information to the next visitor in a chain of silent communication that operates beyond scent, color, or movement. Some blossoms act as natural sonic amplifiers, growing curved or bowl-shaped petals that enhance the sounds of approaching pollinators. The vibrations of certain wingbeats resonate inside the bloom, enabling the plant to detect when a visitor is near and adjust nectar production or reproductive readiness. At the same time, the structure may help insects navigate by reflecting sound in ways that stand out against the ambient noise of the environment, turning the entire flower into a tiny, acoustic instrument shaped by evolution. In dim forests, or the edges of shaded meadows, reflective petals act like small mirrors, scattering light through layers of tissue with tiny folds and air pockets that bounce brightness outward, creating a glow visible even in low light. To human eyes it appears soft, but to insects capable of perceiving ultraviolet or faint luminosity, these flowers shine brilliantly, signaling their presence during hours when most blooms fade into obscurity. High in mountain meadows, where temperatures swing dramatically between warmth and icy winds, certain flowers cover their petals with fine hairs that trap a thin layer of still air, creating natural insulation that protects delicate tissues from freezing and shields pigments and pollen from harsh UV radiation. This protective fuzz not only keeps the flower stable in an unpredictable climate but also offers insects a slightly warmer landing place, encouraging longer visits and more thorough pollination. Many flowers enrich their nectar with complex chemical messages, blending sugars, amino acids, ions, and specialized compounds that affect the behavior, memory, and feeding patterns of their visitors. Some chemicals sharpen a bee's memory so it recalls a flower's scent more clearly, while others thicken the nectar or alter its energy content to influence how long an insect stays. In some species, nectar composition changes with time, first stimulating exploration and later calming visitors once enough pollen has been transferred, forming a dynamic communication that pollinators respond to instinctively. Other flowers send their seeds not by wind or animal but by water, equipping them with buoyant coats, spongy tissues, or air pockets that keep them afloat as they drift along rivers, lakes, or tidal shores, sometimes traveling great distances before settling into mud or sand. These seeds withstand salt, moisture changes, and decay through protective layers that shield the embryo throughout its long journey, allowing a single plant to colonize far-off shores without ever moving itself. Some of the most determined species bloom beneath or even through snow. Their underground structures store energy all winter, and as soon as soil warms slightly, new shoots generate enough metabolic heat to melt small tunnels upward, emerging into the cold air with thick, waxy petals that protect reproductive parts from freezing. These early blooms take advantage of bright light unobstructed by leaves and attract the few active pollinators desperate for food at the start of the year, turning their resilience into a first-come foothold in the growing season. Within the curved chambers of certain blossoms, microclimates form as petals cup or overlap to trap warmth, humidity, and calm air. Sunlight enters and becomes gentle heat, held close by the structure, creating a stable environment that prevents pollen from drying and keeps stigmas receptive. Insects resting inside find refuge from cold mornings or hot afternoons, lingering longer than they would in the open air, which in turn increases pollination success. In this way, some flowers become tiny, climate-controlled rooms built for both plant and pollinator. And in hilly landscapes where slope orientation changes everything, some flowers bloom only on slopes facing a specific direction. South-facing slopes may offer warmth and earlier light, while north-facing ones provide moisture and coolness. By adapting to one orientation, these species optimize temperature, sunlight, and soil conditions that match their biological needs, turning the simple angle of a hillside into a finely tuned ecological niche. Across all these remarkable strategies, mechanical traps, explosive pollen bursts, warming blooms, chemical communication, nocturnal rhythms, motion-triggered structures, trunk flowers, exclusive partnerships, humidity sensing, dew mimicry, electrical signaling, sonic amplification, reflective surfaces, insulating hairs, complex nectar chemistry, waterborne seeds, snow blooming persistence, built-in microclimates, and slope specialization, flowers demonstrate an extraordinary range of adaptations that shape interactions with insects, animals, weather, and landscape. Each bloom, no matter how small or familiar, carries within it a world of quiet engineering and elegant survival, proving that nature's creativity extends far beyond what we see at first glance, weaving strategies of light, scent, movement, temperature, electricity, acoustics, chemistry, and geography into a single breathtaking tapestry of life. Sunlight strikes the land at countless angles throughout the day, and these shifting beams shape the hidden rhythms that many flowering plants rely on for their very survival. Because the heat, brightness, and duration of light influence evaporation, soil temperature, and the subtle balance of moisture that roots depend on. On certain slopes, the soil remains cooler or warmer depending on the direction and steepness of the terrain, and over countless generations some flowering species become so finely adapted to these micro-patterns that they appear only on hillsides facing a particular direction, vanishing the moment the slope turns away from their favorite exposure. Their seeds germinate successfully only when winter snow melts at the right pace, either too quickly nor too slowly, and when spring sunshine arrives with the precise intensity that matches their inherited expectations. The roots depend on a moisture regime that is either overly dry nor suffocatingly saturated, a balance created by the path of light and shade moving across that slope every day. As a result, entire populations form narrow, ribbon-like bands that trace invisible lines of temperature, water, and light, and to someone walking across the landscape, it may seem mysterious that a beautiful flower blankets one hillside yet disappears instantly as the hill curves into another direction. This pattern is not random at all but rather the mark of extraordinary environmental tuning, where evolution has etched a plant's requirements into every part of its life cycle. Some flowering species refine their strategy even further by timing their blooming to avoid competition entirely, especially in ecosystems pulsing with activity where multiple species share the same general pollinators. Instead of trying to outshine competitors with brighter colors or larger displays, some plants adopt the subtle tactic of shifting their flowering schedule to periods of reduced competition. They bloom earlier in the season, or later, or within brief windows when other blossoms are scarce, allowing their signals to stand out in a less cluttered world. Their internal biological clocks draw on cues such as day length, accumulated warmth, and rainfall patterns, and when these signals align with their genetically coded timing rules, entire populations erupt into blossom together, dominating the pollination landscape for a short time. Once pollination is complete, they silently fade just as other species begin their turn. This elegant staggering allows multiple plants to share the same pollinator community without direct conflict, each stepping into the spotlight in sequence, like dancers in a perfectly timed performance. Some flowers, however, take a very different approach to specialization by hiding their nectar deep inside narrow tubes. Instead of placing rewards on an easily accessible surface, these plants tuck nectar far within elongated floral structures that only certain animals with the correct anatomical tools can reach. Long-tongued bees, hawk moths with extended feeding organs, or birds with slender, probing beaks can access these sweet reserves, while less specialized visitors cannot. This architectural decision acts as a natural filter, excluding inefficient guests that might steal nectar without transferring pollen effectively. When a suitable pollinator reaches into the tube, its head or face inevitably presses against the anthers and stigma placed strategically around the entrance. Pollen dusts the exact body parts that will touch the next flower of the same kind, creating a precise and dependable system of pollen transfer. The depth of the tube becomes a gatekeeper, shaping the entire relationship between plant and pollinator, ensuring that the energy invested in nectar yields reliable reproductive success. Other flowers depend not just on shape but on the chemistry of the soil beneath them, and in some remarkable species, petal color is not fixed but varies with soil acidity or alkalinity. Pigment molecules inside the petals change structure depending on the ions absorbed through the roots, shifting hues from soft pink to deep violet or clear blue. Gardeners often notice that the same shrub displays different colors in different areas of the yard, or that blooms slowly transform over time as soil composition subtly changes. In natural ecosystems, this color responsiveness can influence which pollinators are attracted, how well flowers stand out or blend into the background, and how plants adapt to fluctuations in mineral availability. Each bloom becomes a living indicator of the hidden chemistry beneath it, translating unseen conditions into breathtaking visual signals. In even harsher environments, such as volcanic landscapes formed by eruptions and fresh lava flows, certain flowers manage to survive and even thrive. Volcanic ground begins as a harsh mix of ash, pumice, and fractured rock that holds almost no water, yet some pioneering plants anchor their roots into tiny crevices where rare rainwater collects along with trace minerals. As volcanic ash weathers and breaks down, it releases nutrients slowly, forming isolated pockets of fertility that these hardy flowers exploit long before other plant life can establish itself. Their blossoms appear quickly during short windows of favorable weather, completing their entire reproductive cycle before conditions swing again between intense heat and sudden chill. Their roots help stabilize the loose debris, gradually transforming barren ground into a surface capable of supporting more life. These plants stand among the first signs of ecological recovery after destruction, proving that even in newborn landscapes where the earth is still settling, flowers find ways to adapt, persist, and rebuild the foundations for future ecosystems. Some flowers communicate with pollinators using signals invisible to human eyes, such as infrared heat patterns produced by concentrated metabolic activity within their petals or central structures. These subtle thermal cues guide insects capable of sensing temperature differences, helping them locate nectar and pollen even in low light or dense foliage. During times of heavy pollinator activity, the flowers increase their heat output to generate stronger thermal signals, and when fewer visitors are present, the warmth fades to conserve energy. For many insects, detecting temperature gradients is far easier than distinguishing colors, especially in shaded environments. These warm spots even help pollinators warm their flight muscles, encouraging them to spend more time within the flower and enhancing the chances of effective pollen transfer. This invisible communication system reveals yet another layer of complexity in how plants interact with the living world. Some blossoms go even further by incorporating microscopic mirrors within their petals. These structures, made from carefully layered cells and air pockets arranged with astonishing precision, redirect incoming light, amplifying brightness through multiple internal reflections. To insects with sophisticated vision, these petals shimmer with enhanced color or subtle iridescent flashes that shift depending on viewing angle. The reflections not only attract pollinators but also shield delicate tissues from excessive sunlight by scattering harsh rays away from sensitive areas. In crowded habitats where numerous species bloom simultaneously, these optical adaptations provide a competitive edge, transforming each petal into both a luminous beacon and a protective barrier. Finally, some flowers develop surfaces resembling Velcro, covered with tiny hooks or barbs that gently snag onto the bodies of visiting insects. These structures hold the pollinator in place just long enough to ensure that pollen is properly picked up or deposited, without causing harm or preventing the insect from eventually pulling free. As the visitor navigates these textured surfaces, it passes over precisely positioned anthers and stigmas designed to maximize contact. This slows down nectar thieves who might otherwise dart in and out without performing any beneficial pollination, while encouraging legitimate pollinators to spend enough time interacting with the flower. The hooks are flexible enough to avoid injury yet firm enough to guide movement, showing how texture alone can shape behavior and orchestrate a controlled exchange between plant and pollinator. Without traps or coercion, the flower manages to create an environment in which cooperation becomes the most efficient path for both plant and insect. Across all these examples, from color-shifting petals to volcanic pioneers, from thermal signals to microscopic mirrors, from narrow nectar tubes to Velcro-like textures, flowers reveal themselves as extraordinary engineers of survival and communication. Their strategies arise from millions of years of adaptation, each tiny detail contributing to a complex and beautiful dance between sunlight, soil, weather, and the living creatures that visit them. Behind every blossom lies an intricate web of relationships and innovations that allow life to flourish in environments ranging from fertile meadows to barren ash fields. And though many of their adaptations are hidden from casual observers, the landscapes around us are shaped and sustained by these delicate yet powerful designs, woven quietly into the fabric of the natural world. In many ecosystems shaped by fire, certain extraordinary flowers have evolved not merely to survive flames but to depend on them as essential triggers for renewal, emerging triumphantly after the ash settles and the landscape begins its cycle of rebirth. Although the visible portions of these plants often perish in the blaze, the true heart of their survival lies hidden beneath the soil in specialized structures, bulbs, rhizomes, or hardy root systems, that remain insulated from lethal heat, and, as soon as the fire passes, the environment transforms into a bright, open stage rich with nutrients released from burned vegetation, creating precisely the conditions these resilient species need to awaken from dormancy, sending up fresh shoots fueled by reserves stored during previous seasons, while their seeds, adapted to wait for just the right chemical cues, often require compounds in smoke or the heat of fire itself to crack their dormancy, ensuring germination only when competitors have been cleared away. And once these new blossoms rise, often in striking, synchronized waves, they become invaluable resources for pollinators searching for nourishment in the newly exposed terrain, illustrating that fire functions not only as an occasional hazard but as a fundamental catalyst for the life cycle of these remarkable plants. Meanwhile, other species use entirely different strategies rooted in the manipulation of airflow to spread their scent efficiently through the environment. Relying on cleverly shaped petals that form natural channels, funnels, or curved surfaces to guide breezes across their blooms, allowing fragrance molecules to travel farther with minimal energy expenditure, some blossoms even shaping microvortices that lift scent upward into air currents commonly used by flying insects, while delicate ridges or subtle contours on petals can direct wind flow with surprising precision, enabling these plants to reduce the amount of scent they must produce while still reaching their intended pollinators, who in turn benefit from strong, reliable odor trails that guide them across challenging landscapes. This interplay between structure and airflow transforms each flower into a miniature architectural device, expertly crafted by evolution to communicate with the surrounding atmosphere in ways that feel almost engineered, and just as they control scent distribution. Some flowers also create natural sunscreens within their tissues, equipping their pollen with chemical shields that absorb harmful ultraviolet rays before they can cause damage, with protective pigments settling into the outer layers of petals and anthers, forming an invisible but powerful defensive barrier that remains stable even under hours of intense sunlight. And many of these same UV-absorbing compounds influence the plant's visible coloration, contributing to the rich blues, purples, and reds that define certain species, while the plant may increase production of these pigments during hotter portions of the day to strengthen protection when environmental stress peaks, thereby ensuring pollen remains viable when carried from bloom to bloom, merging beauty and biological necessity into a single functionally elegant design. In even harsher environments, some flowers grow on sheer cliffs and exposed rocks where soil is almost non-existent, relying on roots that probe into microscopic cracks to find minute accumulations of dust and mineral particles, and over time, these roots slowly widen the crevices, creating slightly more stable footholds that allow small pockets of life to cling to otherwise barren stone. And because nutrients are extremely limited, these cliff-dwelling plants allocate their resources with great precision, growing slowly, maintaining thick or waxy leaves to reduce water loss, and blooming only when moisture becomes available. Yet despite these challenges, they still produce flowers capable of attracting pollinators that travel along rock faces or are guided by wind currents, demonstrating how even the most inhospitable surfaces can become habitats when plants adapt with sufficient ingenuity. And while many blossoms use fragrance as an invitation, some flowers have the opposite goal, hiding their scent from predators or herbivores while still communicating with pollinators, a feat they accomplish through remarkable selective release, emitting aroma only in specific directions or only within enclosed chambers formed by carefully shaped petals so that an insect entering the bloom is enveloped in fragrance while animals outside detect almost nothing, and other species adjust scent chemistry so that nectar-related compounds remain masked until a trusted pollinator is extremely close, or they time their fragrance release to coincide with periods when threats are inactive, revealing yet another layer of sophistication in the delicate balance between attraction and protection. Similarly, certain flowers use temperature as a lure, warming their petals through efficient absorption of sunlight or concentrated metabolic activity so that the bloom becomes a gentle heat source that attracts insects, especially in cool climates or during morning hours when warmth can help pollinators activate their flight muscles. And once these visitors land on the bloom, the comfortable temperature encourages them to stay longer, exploring the flower thoroughly and interacting more effectively with pollen, while the heat simultaneously helps volatile scent compounds lift into the air, further expanding the flower's reach, blending energy use, communication, and reproductive strategy in a subtle but powerful way that illustrates how even temperature can become a tool in the complex conversation between plants and animals. And just as some flowers warm their petals, others contain built-in optical structures, natural lenses created by curved petal tissues that bend and concentrate sunlight toward the reproductive center of the bloom, helping to keep pollen warmer and more active during cool or cloudy conditions, while the variations in density among petal layers cause incoming light to bend and focus, creating soft glows that may appear as shimmering highlights visible to pollinators with sensitivity to contrast, making the lens effect both functional and visually striking, and allowing the plant to attract visitors without relying heavily on pigments, saving energy while thriving even in dimly lit habitats such as forest understories. Perhaps most astonishingly, there are flowers that grow in complete darkness inside caves where sunlight never reaches and photosynthesis becomes impossible, surviving through intimate relationships with underground fungi that decompose organic material washed into the cavern by water or carried by wandering animals, with the plants receiving essential nutrients and carbon compounds unlocked by fungal metabolism in exchange for structural support and stable habitat, resulting in ghostly pale or translucent blooms that do not require chlorophyll and instead invest in thick petals, lingering scents, and tactile features that guide cave-dwelling insects which navigate predominantly by touch and smell rather than sight, and these plants often bloom only during rare combinations of moisture and temperature, demonstrating that even the absence of light cannot prevent the persistence of flowering life. All of these strategies, from surviving wildfire to directing airflow, building sunscreens, clinging to bare stone, hiding scent, generating warmth, shaping light with natural lenses, or thriving in eternal night, illustrate the astonishing diversity, resilience, and ingenuity of flowers across the world, each adaptation representing a finely tuned response to environmental pressures, biological partnerships, and ecological challenges. And together they form a vast tapestry of floral innovation that reveals how plants, through millions of years of evolution, have mastered an astounding array of methods to survive, reproduce, and communicate in environments ranging from open meadows to volcanic slopes, windy cliffs, shadowed forests, and deep subterranean realms where their blooms continue the ancient rhythms of growth and renewal in ways both subtle and spectacular. Some flowers can survive fire and bloom after the ash settles, creating an astonishing display of rebirth that unfolds in ecosystems where flames are not merely destructive forces but essential participants in the life cycles of certain plants. Because while the visible stems and leaves may perish in the blaze, the protected structures deep underground, thickened roots, insulated buds, and shielded storage organs lie hidden beneath the soil where heat cannot fully reach them, and once the fire has passed, the landscape becomes an open, nutrient-rich canvas infused with minerals released by burned vegetation, signaling these buried tissues to awaken as new shoots rise quickly from stored reserves accumulated in previous growing seasons. And many seeds belonging to fire-dependent species require exposure to smoke-borne chemicals to break dormancy so that germination only occurs when flames have cleared competing vegetation and left the ground primed for fresh growth, leading to mass blooming events that attract pollinators searching for nourishment in the newly exposed environment, proving that this cycle is not merely survival but a strategy that uses fire as a catalyst for renewal, allowing these plants to reclaim the landscape precisely when conditions are most favorable. While other flowers manipulate airflow to spread their scents efficiently by shaping petals into channels that direct breezes through the bloom, allowing fragrance molecules to disperse farther with very little energy so that insects flying above or beside the plant encounter scent trails that guide them with clarity. And some flowers with curved petals or ridges create tiny vortices that lift aroma upward into layers of air where pollinators travel, reducing the amount of fragrance needed by allowing aerodynamic design to amplify the signal. And these airflow patterns ensure that scent becomes a highly efficient communication tool that reaches the right pollinators even at great distances. As the bloom acts like a miniature architectural device that interacts with the atmosphere itself, and some flowers contain natural sunscreens to protect their pollen from ultraviolet damage, producing molecules that absorb harmful UV rays before they can injure sensitive pollen grains. With these pigments settling into petal and anther surfaces to form a protective shield that remains stable during long hours under intense sunlight, and many of these compounds influence visible coloration, creating rich blues, deep purples, and warm reds that attract pollinators while simultaneously defending reproductive structures. And as the sun intensifies, the plant may increase the production of these protective molecules, enhancing its defenses at the hottest parts of the day so that pollen remains viable and ready for transfer from bloom to bloom, demonstrating how beauty and function merge seamlessly in floral evolution, while other flowers grow directly on rocks and cliffs where soil is almost non-existent, using specialized roots that reach into tiny cracks to gather minerals from dust and microscopic sediments trapped in stone, widening these cracks slowly over years to create footholds that support persistent growth despite the harsh environment. And these cliff-dwelling plants survive with minimal nutrients by growing slowly, developing thick or waxy leaves to conserve water, and blooming during brief moisture windows where they seize rare opportunities to reproduce, proving that life needs only the smallest foothold to flourish. And some flowers hide their scent from predators by releasing fragrance only in specific directions or through enclosed chambers that reveal aroma only to pollinators that venture inside, while predators outside smell almost nothing. And some blossoms alter their scent chemistry so that nectar-carrying notes remain undetectable until a safe visitor comes close enough to trigger chemical cues, allowing the plant to communicate selectively and avoid attracting creatures that may damage petals or steal nectar without helping in pollination, turning scent into a carefully regulated resource used strategically to balance attraction and safety. And certain flowers use petal temperature to attract insects, creating warmth that exceeds surrounding air either by absorbing sunlight with remarkable efficiency or by concentrating metabolic activity in specific tissues that radiate gentle heat, drawing pollinators that benefit from warmer landing sites, especially during cool mornings or in cold climates, encouraging insects to linger longer, explore more deeply, and interact with pollen in patterns that increase the effectiveness of pollination. And warm petals also help scent molecules rise into the air, extending the reach of fragrance and increasing visibility to potential visitors, making temperature an elegant tool of attraction. And some flowers possess built-in lenses formed by cellular structures with differing densities that bend and focus light toward the reproductive center, warming pollen and enhancing its activity during cooler times of day, while also creating subtle reflections or glimmers that help pollinators identify the bloom from afar by using contrast that requires very little pigment investment. And these optical tricks allow plants in shaded or forested environments to attract visitors even when light is weak or scattered, turning each blossom into a tiny, naturally formed lens of biological engineering. And deep inside caves where sunlight never enters and photosynthesis is impossible, rare flowers survive by partnering with underground fungi that break down organic matter brought into the cave by dripping water, winds, or animals, supplying nutrients that replace the energy the plant would normally gain from light, and without the need for green pigments. These flowers often appear pale, ghost-like, or translucent, with thick petals adapted to constant humidity and still air that allows scent to linger longer and attract cave insects that navigate by scent and touch rather than sight, showing that even in complete darkness the cycles of blooming and reproduction persist through alternative strategies of nourishment and communication. And some flowers offer caffeinated nectar to influence pollinator memory, producing biochemical compounds that enhance learning centers in insects so they remember the scent, shape, or path to a particular bloom more clearly, creating loyalty that keeps pollinators returning repeatedly without the plant having to produce excess nectar. And this subtle manipulation strengthens the relationship between plant and pollinator in ways that appear deliberate yet arise entirely through natural evolution. And some aquatic flowers create floating highways for beetles by producing broad, sturdy petals that rest on the water's surface and distribute weight so evenly that insects can crawl across them without sinking, encouraging pollinators to move from bloom to bloom along pathways shaped by petal incline, surface texture, and subtle reflectivity that guides insects toward the center where pollen waits, transforming ponds and marshes into dynamic ecosystems where water supports a delicate choreography of motion and pollination. And some flowering plants use fungal networks beneath the soil to coordinate blooming, sharing chemical messages through microscopic strands that allow entire populations to bloom in synchronized waves triggered by moisture, microbial presence, or seasonal shifts detected by only a few plants first, turning flowering into a community-wide decision that increases pollinator turnout and improves reproductive success, while also preventing wasted energy on poorly timed blooms, showing that life beneath the soil is deeply interconnected through these silent exchanges of nutrients and information. And certain flowers form symbiotic partnerships with birds, whose beak lengths match floral tubes precisely, whose vision aligns with the flower's vivid coloration, and whose migratory patterns determine blooming schedules so that the plant and bird depend wholly on one another for nourishment and reproduction, with wing movements, feeding posture, and feather placement all guiding where pollen attaches before the bird travels to another bloom, revealing a mutualistic relationship refined over countless generations. And a few flowers use sticky internal threads to capture airborne pollen, forming delicate meshes that catch grains drifting through the air even when wind is inconsistent or pollinators are scarce, allowing the plant to gather what it needs passively and guide the captured grains toward receptive structures through capillary motion or slight movements of the petals, proving that pollination strategies can be both simple and elegant. And some flowers bloom for only a single hour, releasing their petals in a dramatic unfurling after building pressure and storing energy for days, opening precisely when a specific insect is active or when humidity or light align perfectly, and completing all essential exchanges within that narrow window before closing permanently to protect developing seeds, demonstrating an extraordinary reliance on timing so exact that one missed moment could halt reproduction. And some flowers generate subtle magnetic fields due to ionic movement and nutrient flow within their tissues, creating faint signatures detectable by insects with magnetoreceptive abilities that use these signals to locate the most rewarding parts of the bloom, illustrating yet another layer of communication invisible to human senses. And other flowers bloom according to lunar rhythms, responding not just to sunlight but also to changes in nighttime brightness and the gravitational influence of the moon. Coordinating mass blooming during specific lunar phases when nocturnal pollinators navigate more easily and competition with solar-dependent species decreases, linking their reproductive cycles to cosmic patterns that have remained constant for millions of years. And some flowers produce nectar that changes flavor throughout the day, altering sugar composition, viscosity, and aromatic compounds to attract different pollinators during morning, midday, and evening, offering quick energy at dawn, richer complexity at noon, and softer fragrant rewards at dusk, adapting biochemical pathways to shifting temperatures and visitor patterns so that the flower remains relevant and attractive throughout the entire cycle of daylight, creating a dynamic and responsive system in which nectar becomes not just nourishment, but a carefully adjusted language guiding the movements and decisions of the creatures that sustain the plant's future. Life inside the floral world operates through strategies so subtle and refined that they often go unnoticed, yet they shape entire ecosystems with remarkable precision, and instead of forming environments that resemble the bright, competitive spaces outside, many flowers create worlds where life adapts through cooperation, sensory ingenuity, and unusual relationships that unfold quietly across petals, roots, and even the air itself. For example, some flowers produce caffeinated nectar that gently alters the behavior of pollinators by sharpening their ability to remember scents, petal patterns, and flight paths, a remarkable adaptation driven by biochemical pathways that create mild stimulants capable of influencing insect memory without harming them, allowing the plant to encourage loyal returns without wasting extra nectar. And over time, this subtle strategy builds dependable routes between blossoms as pollinators form lasting associations with specific flowers, demonstrating a form of chemical communication that benefits both partners. Meanwhile, in aquatic environments, a different type of floral intelligence unfolds as certain water-dwelling plants create floating highways for beetles and other crawling insects by producing blossoms that rest upon the surface of ponds and marshes, their broad petals distributing weight to form stable platforms that guide small creatures toward the center of the bloom where scent, texture, and warmth encourage exploration. And as insects wander across these natural bridges, they accumulate pollen and carry it from one floating flower to another, turning the water itself into a component of the plant's pollination strategy. Below the surface of the soil, an even more complex form of cooperation appears as flowering plants connect to vast fungal networks, intricate webs that transfer nutrients, minerals, and chemical signals between roots, allowing entire communities of plants to coordinate blooming events in synchronized waves, triggered when one plant detects changes in moisture or microbial presence and sends messages through the fungal strands, ensuring that pollinators encounter dense clusters of blossoms while also helping individual plants avoid wasting energy on poorly timed flowering, revealing a hidden communication system more sophisticated than anything seen above ground. In other ecosystems, flowers take on bird partners, evolving long tubular blossoms matched perfectly to the beak length of a single species, adjusting nectar composition to fuel high-energy flight, and timing blooms to coincide with seasonal migrations, creating partnerships so precise that each visit attaches pollen to specific parts of a bird's feathers or face, turning the animal into a mobile bridge between widely spaced blossoms and illustrating how plants and birds can shape one another over countless generations. Some flowers modify the air itself by producing sticky threads inside their petals that capture airborne pollen drifting on the wind, forming delicate internal meshes that trap grains belonging to the same species and move them gradually toward the stigma, enabling pollination even in habitats with few insect visitors. Other species compress their entire reproductive window into a single hour, storing energy for days before unfurling petals in a sudden burst aligned with the movement of a particular insect. A precise humidity change, or a fleeting beam of sunlight reaching a hidden forest floor. And once that moment passes, the bloom closes forever, ensuring that seeds develop in protected darkness. Some flowers even generate faint magnetic fields through the movement of charged particles within their tissues, creating subtle signals that insects with magnetoreceptive abilities can detect as they approach, helping them locate the most rewarding parts of the bloom and guiding the placement of pollen in ways invisible to humans. A number of species synchronize their blooming with lunar cycles, responding not only to daylight but also to shifts in nighttime brightness and gravitational pull, coordinating entire populations to bloom during specific moon phases when nocturnal pollinators navigate more easily, reducing competition with plants that rely exclusively on sunlight cues, and aligning their delicate rhythms with tide-driven moisture changes in coastal regions. Still others create nectar that changes flavor throughout the day as internal biochemical pathways adjust. Sugars and aromatic compounds based on humidity, temperature, and the types of visitors present, offering morning nectar rich in quick energy, midday nectar dense and complex for experienced pollinators, and evening nectar fragrant and soft for dusk-active species, ensuring consistent pollination across the full daylight cycle. Some flowers hold their warmest and most inviting fragrances until sunset, releasing volatile molecules in calm twilight air to attract nocturnal moths and beetles that navigate more by scent than sight, conserving energy by avoiding midday heat when scent evaporates quickly or attracts unwanted herbivores, creating a reliable meeting point between plant and nighttime visitor during the quiet threshold between day and darkness. Within the sheltered folds of certain blossoms, tiny invertebrate communities thrive, forming miniature ecosystems of mites, insects, and microscopic creatures that find stable humidity, food particles, nectar traces, and warmth among the petals, and their presence benefits the plant by stirring pollen, consuming debris, or crowding out harmful species, transforming the flower from a temporary reproductive organ into a brief but vibrant home for entire microcommunities. Some species strengthen their chemical defenses during full sun by activating enzymes that produce bitter or pungent compounds discouraging herbivores and microbes, while forming protective pigments that deepen petal colors as ultraviolet intensity rises, shielding delicate tissues during the most dangerous hours before reducing chemical output at dusk to conserve energy, demonstrating how internal clocks work in tandem with light intensity to regulate survival strategies. A few extraordinary species bloom underground, never seeing sunlight, forming thick pale blossoms in moist soil chambers where small mammals, burrowing insects, or earth-dwelling creatures act as pollinators, guided only by strong scents drifting through tunnels and cracks. A method that protects flowers from predators, weather extremes, and surface instability. In very bright habitats, some flowers evolve petals that act like natural solar panels, absorbing sunlight and converting part of it into warmth that stabilizes pollen development and keeps visiting insects comfortable, enabling the plant to maintain fragrance and metabolic activity even when clouds briefly block the sun, showing how petals can function as heat-managing organs rather than simple displays. Other flowers abandon animal pollinators entirely, releasing vast blizzards of pollen into the wind, shaping grains for maximum lift and distance while producing no bright colors or fragrances since no insect needs to be attracted, relying instead on dry breezes and open landscapes to carry reproductive material across wide regions. A strategy that requires producing massive quantities of pollen to overcome the randomness of wind, and in some species, the symmetry of the flower itself depends on temperature, with perfectly balanced, star-like blossoms forming only within narrow climate ranges. Some flowers can detect vibrations from approaching pollinators, and this remarkable ability reveals just how deeply interconnected the plant world is with the movement and music of the environment around it, for in the quiet spaces of a meadow, in the stillness between breezes, there are blossoms that listen not with ears but with the fine trembling of petals and inner tissues that behave like exquisitely tuned sensors, responding to the subtle quiver of air created by the wing beats of insects, long before those visitors come into view. These petals, though delicate to the eye, are supported by flexible cellular networks capable of transmitting mechanical signals with surprising accuracy, allowing the flower to identify vibration signatures that belong specifically to helpful pollinators rather than random passers-by or creatures that bring no benefit. When the right vibration pattern is detected, the plant activates an entire sequence of internal adjustments. Nectar becomes sweeter and more concentrated, stamens may reposition themselves to ensure optimal pollen transfer, and temperature within the floral chamber may rise slightly, making the bloom a more enticing destination. This precision conserves valuable energy, offering the flower's best and most resource-intensive rewards only when the correct partners are near. It also synchronizes the release of pollen with the exact moment an insect is likely to make contact, increasing the accuracy and success of pollination. In some species, petals have evolved into shapes resembling tiny radar dishes, elegantly curved structures that gather and amplify sound waves from the buzzing world around them. These dish-like surfaces act like natural acoustic collectors, focusing vibrations toward highly sensitive tissues deep within the floral body. When a particular pollinator approaches, the reflected sound waves and vibrations allow the blossom to make quick decisions, releasing scent, raising temperature, shifting stamen position, or exposing fresh pollen at the perfect time. Some insects even use the reflections from these curved petals to locate the bloom more efficiently, creating a kind of sensory dialogue between plant and pollinator, a quiet exchange of signals that guides both partners toward mutual benefit. The petal, often assumed to be a mere decorative structure, reveals itself as an active instrument shaping the behavior of sound waves and participating in a shared communication system developed over millions of years of evolution. In other species, flowers produce natural soapy compounds along their surfaces, creating a frothy coating made from specialized fatty acids combined with sugars that break water's surface tension. When dew or rain settles on these petals, tiny bubbles form, shimmering in the light and sliding gently over the floral edges. These bubbles deter insects that might chew or damage the petals, making it difficult for them to grip the slippery surface. They also help clean the flower by carrying away dust, fungal spores, and stray pollen from other species. When the breeze passes over, the bubbles burst and release faint molecules that may serve as chemical signals, warning nearby plants of potential threats, or subtly calling to pollinators. The soapy layer prevents excess moisture from clinging to the petals, protecting them from rot or fungal growth in humid environments. This chemical coat, fragile in appearance yet powerful in function, demonstrates how even the gentlest bloom can employ sophisticated defenses to maintain its health and ensure successful reproduction. Some flowers go even further, forming nectar pools that resemble tiny shimmering lakes nestled within the blossom. Instead of producing small droplets, these species generate broad surfaces of nectar that fill deep chambers, creating reflective pools that catch the sunlight like miniature mirrors. Large pollinators such as butterflies, beetles, and birds navigate these basins with ease, moving across the pool without damaging the delicate tissues beneath. These nectar lakes are not merely food sources. They become microhabitats where tiny organisms gather, feeding on minerals, microorganisms, and organic particles suspended in the sweet liquid. The reflective surface of the nectar illuminates intricate petal patterns and guides pollinators toward the reproductive structures, turning the entire flower into a luminous beacon. Though the plant invests significant energy to produce such large volumes of nectar, it gains a diverse array of visitors that increase its chances of successful pollen transfer. Other flowers protect their developing seeds with chemical armor, surrounding them with layers rich in compounds that taste bitter or irritate the mouths of herbivores. These chemicals inhibit bacterial and fungal growth, creating a fortified shield during the early stages of seed development. As the seed matures, the chemical composition evolves so that the protective layer eventually breaks down more easily in the right environment. After dispersal, in soil rich with moisture, or within the digestive tract of a specific animal that helps carry the seed far from the parent plant. Thus, the same chemical defense that keeps predators away during growth becomes the key that unlocks germination at the ideal moment, demonstrating a brilliant evolutionary balance between protection and release. In yet another marvel, certain flowers form labyrinths within their inner structures. Instead of offering nectar openly, these blossoms design intricate pathways, twisting passages, ridges, spirals, and narrow tunnels that require visiting insects to navigate slowly and carefully. As the visitor follows the route, it brushes against strategically placed pollen-coated surfaces, ensuring maximum pollen transfer. These internal mazes prevent nectar thieves, creatures unable or unwilling to complete the full journey, from stealing the reward without assisting pollination. Each ridge and fold acts as a gatekeeper, guiding the visitor step by step through a carefully orchestrated experience. Some flowers provide more than food, they offer shelter. In colder regions, certain blossoms remain warm long after sunset, their petals forming soft chambers that trap heat absorbed during the day. Inside these floral shelters, bees, beetles, and other small insects survive nighttime temperatures that would otherwise be lethal. In return, the insects often pollinate the flower at dawn, brushing against fresh pollen as they drink the morning nectar. Some species close partially at night, embracing their tiny guests in a protective cradle against frost and wind. In this tender exchange, the flower becomes more than a reproductive structure, it becomes a refuge, a small haven of warmth and safety within the vast chill of nature. Other flowers have developed petal structures that function as miniature ladders, with ridges and tiny steps that help insects climb toward deep nectar pools. These textured surfaces prevent slipping, allowing pollinators of different sizes to move reliably within the bloom. As an insect climbs the petal steps, it naturally aligns its body with the anthers and stigma, ensuring precise pollen placement and transfer. The ladder-like design also reduces damage to the flower, as insects no longer scrape or tear the smooth petal walls in their attempts to reach nectar. Some blossoms time their scent with astonishing accuracy, releasing fragrance according to internal biological clocks that match the daily activity patterns of their preferred pollinators. A flower dependent on dawn-active bees releases its perfume moments before the first light. One visited by midday butterflies holds its fragrance until the sun stands high. Another attracting nocturnal moths fills the air with scent only after nightfall. These rhythms are regulated by intricate chemical pathways that respond to light, temperature, humidity, and the plant's own internal cycles. The timing ensures that energy is not wasted producing fragrance when pollinators are inactive. This exquisite synchronization demonstrates that flowers are far more than silent, passive elements of the landscape. They are active participants in the ecology around them, communicating, defending, adapting, and forming relationships that sustain entire ecosystems. Every vibration detected, every bubble of natural soap formed, every labyrinth carved into a petal, every pool of nectar shimmering like starlit water, all of these reveal the sophisticated strategies that flowers have evolved to survive, thrive, and continue the timeless work of reproduction. In the gentle stillness of gardens, forests, and meadows, these delicate structures perform intricate tasks shaped by millions of years of evolutionary artistry. Their petals respond to invisible tremors in the air, their scents rise and fall with the hours of the day, their defenses form layers of chemistry and architecture, and their forms shift to guide, shelter, entice, and nurture the creatures that depend on them. Flowers, though rooted and unable to roam, live in a world filled with movement, vibrations, sounds, winds, footsteps, and wings, and they have learned to feel, interpret, and respond to that motion with remarkable precision. They are engineers of microhabitats, chemists producing complex molecules, acousticians shaping sound, architects designing tunnels and ladders, and caretakers providing warmth and refuge. In every corner of the natural world, blossoms display intelligence woven not from neurons but from structure, chemistry, and evolutionary memory. And when we look closely, we find that each flower, no matter how small, contains an entire universe of interactions, relationships, and adaptations quietly unfolding within the softness of its petals. Some flowers can detect vibrations from approaching pollinators, responding to the subtle trembling of air produced by the wing beats of insects. Their petals and internal tissues act like finely tuned sensors, picking up vibrations passing through the plant structure. When the correct pattern of movement is detected, the flower makes rapid adjustments, such as increasing nectar concentration or repositioning reproductive structures, making the bloom more rewarding and prepared for the arrival of its visitor. Plant cells, connected by flexible walls, transmit these mechanical signals efficiently, allowing different species to recognize distinct vibration signatures and distinguish between helpful pollinators and creatures that provide no benefit. This sensory ability conserves resources by offering the best rewards only when the right partners are nearby and synchronizes pollen release with visitor contact, improving pollination accuracy. Some flowers evolve petals shaped like radar dishes, curved to gather and reflect sound, acting as tiny listening bowls that amplify acoustic signals created by flying insects. When pollinators approach, the dish-shaped petal focuses the sound towards sensitive tissues, informing the flower when to release scent, shift internal temperature, or expose fresh pollen. These petals can also reflect insect-produced sounds back, creating a sensory dialogue between plant and pollinator, demonstrating that nature can find similar solutions repeatedly even in stationary organisms. A small group of flowers produces soap-like compounds on their surfaces by combining fatty acids with specialized sugars that break surface tension in water. Rain or dew collects these compounds to form small bubbles along petal edges, deterring insects that might chew delicate tissue, reducing their grip, and helping the plant remove dust, foreign pollen, and fungal spores. Breezes break the bubbles, releasing molecules that carry subtle scents or defensive signals, and the coating prevents water from pooling in ways that could cause rot, showing how chemistry keeps fragile blossoms clean, safe, and ready for reproduction. Certain species create nectar pools resembling tiny lakes rather than small droplets, filling wide floral chambers with shallow basins that shimmer in the light, attracting larger visitors like beetles, butterflies, or birds capable of moving across without damaging the interior. These nectar pools act as both a reward and habitat, sometimes hosting tiny organisms feeding on dissolved minerals and organic matter. The reflective surface enhances visibility by bouncing light onto complex petal patterns, guiding pollinators toward the center. The plant invests heavily in producing these reservoirs but gains a wide variety of visitors that assist with pollen transfer, turning each bloom into a miniature oasis of interaction. Some plants protect developing seeds with chemical armor, surrounding them with compounds that deter herbivores, fungi, or insects. The concentration of these chemicals increases as the seed matures, forming a protective shield, and later shifts composition to allow germination under favorable conditions. This strategy ensures protection during development and facilitates emergence without heavy investment in thick walls or hard shells, making chemistry both a defensive and reproductive tool. Certain flowers form labyrinths inside their petals, creating twisting, rising, and curving pathways that guide insects through controlled journeys, ensuring they contact pollen-coated surfaces and preventing nectar theft. These intricate structures regulate how each visitor interacts with reproductive parts, turning a simple visit into an effective pollination event. In cooler climates, some flowers provide overnight shelter to pollinators, trapping heat absorbed during the day within insulating chambers, allowing insects to survive cold nights and feed on nectar in the morning, which aids pollen transfer. Other species build petal structures like ladders with stepped ridges that help insects climb toward nectar in deep floral chambers, aligning them with anthers and stigmas for precise pollen transfer while accommodating various pollinator body sizes. Many flowers release scent in timed coordination with pollinator activity, controlled by internal biological clocks that respond to cycles of light and temperature, ensuring energy is not wasted and fragrance reaches the intended audience, turning scent into a precise communication tool. Some blossoms shift orientation toward approaching bees by sensing vibrations, adjusting internal water pressure and specialized cells to place the blossom in the most accessible position, increasing the likelihood of successful pollen contact while minimizing awkward collisions. Certain flowers detect nectar thieves attempting to access nectar without contributing to pollination, responding by reducing nectar production, thickening the fluid, or slightly closing petals to force intruders to abandon attempts. Mechanical sensors within the floral tissue detect pressure or movement patterns different from legitimate pollinators, preserving resources for effective partners. Some species grow exclusively in highly restricted habitats, such as a single cliff face or canyon wall, relying on unique conditions like mineral-rich water, stable temperatures, or protective wind patterns. These specialized flowers often remain unknown to science due to inaccessible locations, illustrating the extreme adaptations plants can make to survive in precise environments. Certain blossoms use microvibrations to dislodge pollen, holding grains inside narrow antherchambers that release pollen only when a specific vibration frequency from visiting insects triggers a controlled burst, coating the visitor precisely and conserving pollen by preventing random loss, creating a living lock and key system between flower and pollinator. Some flowers have multi-chambered nectaries, where interconnected pockets store varying concentrations or types of nectar, forcing pollinators to navigate a sequence of chambers that naturally positions them for optimal contact with pollen-producing surfaces while slowing feeding and rationing resources, sometimes excluding less effective visitors. Certain species develop metallic pigments in petals that reflect light selectively, creating shimmering effects visible only at close range, guiding pollinators with precision while conserving energy by limiting the visual display to nearby insects. Microbial allies often reside inside petals, consuming pathogens, stabilizing nectar chemistry, or producing subtle scents that attract pollinators, forming mutualistic partnerships where microbes gain habitat and nutrients while the plant gains improved reproductive success. Some flowers display ultraviolet patterns invisible to humans but highly visible to pollinators like bees, guiding them to nectar and pollen while protecting the plant from sunlight damage and indicating bloom freshness. Certain blossoms produce bioluminescent nectar that glows faintly at night, attracting nocturnal pollinators in low light, guiding them along shallow pools or narrow channels, with the plant investing energy only during peak pollinator activity. Other flowers release chemical scent decoys mimicking insect pheromones, drawing insects toward the bloom under the guise of a mate, nesting site, or food source. Collectively, these strategies reveal the remarkable complexity of floral adaptations, demonstrating that flowers can sense vibrations, manipulate acoustics, produce specialized chemicals, create physical microenvironments, provide shelter, and communicate visually and chemically in ways that ensure effective pollination, protect resources, and maintain delicate ecological relationships. Each blossom becomes more than a static reproductive structure. It functions as a dynamic participant in its ecosystem, integrating mechanical, chemical, visual, thermal, and spatial strategies to interact with a variety of organisms. Flowers coordinate these traits with extraordinary precision, timing nectar production, scent release, temperature adjustments, orientation changes, pollen dispersal, and protective measures to coincide with pollinator behaviors and environmental cues. This orchestration maximizes reproductive success while minimizing energy expenditure and risk from herbivores, pathogens, or unpredictable weather. In some species, complex structural designs like labyrinths, ladders, or multi-chambered nectaries guide pollinators along precise paths, ensuring effective pollen transfer and discouraging nectar theft. In others, petals act as acoustic amplifiers or radar-like dishes, reflecting sound to detect approaching insects and inform timing of scent, temperature, or pollen release. Biochemical adaptations, such as soap-like surface compounds, chemical seed armor, or nectar with varying composition, further enhance protection, attract appropriate pollinators, or cultivate beneficial microbial communities. Many flowers also exploit light and color in ways imperceptible to humans, from metallic or ultraviolet pigments to bioluminescent nectar, creating cues that guide specific pollinators to their resources. These multi-layered adaptations illustrate the profound intelligence embedded in plant biology, revealing that even rooted organisms have evolved highly sensitive, responsive, and interactive systems that coordinate with the behavior and sensory abilities of their animal partners. Flowers living in extreme or specialized habitats, including subterranean, cliff-bound, or canyon-restricted environments, show how species can refine these strategies to survive in unique niches, adapting roots, petals, nectar, and reproductive timing to the constraints of their precise microhabitats. Overall, these dynamic interactions between flowers and their environment, pollinators, and microbial allies exemplify the extraordinary ingenuity of evolutionary processes, where chemical signaling, physical structure, mechanical sensing, optical displays, thermal management, and spatial design converge to ensure reproduction, conserve energy, and maintain intricate ecological networks, turning each flower into a multifaceted, interactive, and highly efficient reproductive hub that is simultaneously a habitat, communication center, and guiding system for the organisms that depend upon it. By integrating temporal, mechanical, chemical, visual, and spatial adaptations, flowers orchestrate a continuous, responsive dialogue with their surroundings, ensuring that pollination occurs efficiently, seeds are protected, energy is conserved, and ecological relationships remain balanced. Demonstrating the remarkable sophistication of plant life as both active participants and subtle engineers within complex ecosystems, and revealing that every blossom is a miniature marvel of natural design. Capable of sensing, responding, and interacting with multiple layers of its environment and co-inhabitants to maximize reproductive success and sustain life around it. During the investigation, some flowers use decoy strategies, brushing against pollen-producing structures and transferring grains to an insect's body without offering nectar or other rewards, gaining pollination during short blooming periods before insects learn to ignore false signals. The scent molecules are produced with remarkable precision, mimicking not only general aromas but complex blends used by insects to locate partners, effectively communicating in a language already understood by another species and redirecting it to serve the plant's reproductive needs. In some ecosystems, multiple flowering species share pollinators through intricate natural negotiations. Rather than competing blindly, they bloom at different times of the day, display contrasting colors to prevent confusion, and adjust nectar volumes or scent emissions to ensure pollinators distribute their visits evenly, creating a dynamic balance where no single species dominates entirely. And pollinators receive a continuous sequence of resources, all shaped by natural selection. Certain flowers manipulate air currents to carry pollen farther by designing petals that form channels guiding breezes across anthers and funneling air upward into stronger wind currents, effectively turning the bloom into an aerodynamic structure that controls pollen dispersal, particularly useful in open habitats or where pollinators are scarce, transforming air from a random force into a managed resource. In extreme heat, some flowers develop thick waxy coatings across petals, reflecting sunlight and reducing water loss, forming smooth barriers that protect reproductive structures, soften in cooler conditions to allow safe blooming, and may even carry reflective sheens that lower temperature, demonstrating how environmental pressures sculpt resilience. Spiral petal patterns, seen in some species, emerge from strict numerical relationships during growth, producing spirals akin to shells, hurricanes, and galaxies, distributing sunlight evenly, reducing tissue overlap, and guiding pollinator movements to maximize pollen transfer, showing that floral design intertwines aesthetics with functional precision across light, airflow, and structural dimensions. Aquatic flowers exploit natural buoyancy by trapping air within petal tissues and base structures, maintaining upright positions on water surfaces to display colors and scents clearly, protect pollen, and keep nectar accessible while flexible stems and floating tissues correct lateral displacement, sometimes adjusting internal air distribution as the bloom ages, transforming a potentially hazardous environment into a supportive stage. Certain blossoms store heat from the previous day within dense petal tissues, absorbing solar energy and releasing it gradually overnight, stabilizing internal temperatures, protecting pollen, providing microclimates for sheltering insects, and encouraging early pollinator activity, allowing the plant to extend its daily reproductive window. Other flowers employ camouflage, developing petal patterns that mimic leaves, rocks, soil, or natural light and shadow speckles to conceal themselves from grazers, ensuring survival until they can reproduce. In addition to these strategies, some flowers produce decoy scents mimicking insect pheromones, drawing visitors by suggesting mates, food, or nesting sites. And during brief blooming periods, these deceptive signals facilitate pollination without investment in nectar, with molecules precisely tuned to insect sensory systems. Shared pollinator strategies among species involve temporal separation of bloom times, contrasting coloration, and dynamic nectar and scent adjustments, fostering coexistence and resource distribution, while petals and flower architecture influence air flow to maximize pollen dispersal and avoid surface loss. Adaptations to extreme environments include wax coatings to reflect heat and conserve water, spiral petal arrangements that optimize light exposure and pollinator guidance, and buoyant tissues in aquatic flowers that ensure upright display and reproductive accessibility. Thermal regulation is achieved by storing solar heat in dense tissues to maintain pollen viability and provide comfort for visiting insects, giving these species an edge in fluctuating climates. Camouflage provides protection against herbivores, blending flowers seamlessly into their surroundings. Flowers' structural and chemical strategies are highly integrated. Petals can act as acoustic detectors for pollinators' wing beats. Mechanical sensors detect nectar thieves. Multi-chambered nectaries regulate visitor movement and nectar distribution, and metallic or ultraviolet pigments serve as visual cues visible only to target pollinators. Bioluminescent nectar illuminates nighttime blooms for nocturnal insects, while microbial allies inhabiting petals contribute to nectar chemistry, pathogen control, and scent production, forming mutualistic partnerships. Many flowers create microenvironments to shelter pollinators overnight, provide ladder-like petal ridges for precise pollen transfer, and produce soap-like surface compounds to deter herbivores and clean themselves. Flowers employ chemical seed armor to protect developing seeds while adjusting composition for optimal germination conditions. Labyrinthine petal pathways guide insects through controlled pollination journeys, while timing of scent release, petal movement, and temperature changes is coordinated with pollinator activity to maximize reproductive efficiency. Some species grow in highly restricted or inaccessible habitats, adapting roots, petals, and reproductive timing to microclimatic conditions. Microvibrations trigger precise pollen release and lock-and-key interactions with visiting insects, conserving energy and ensuring pollen reaches receptive partners. Flowers also manipulate nectar composition, multi-chambered nectaries, or reflective pools to guide and reward pollinators efficiently, while ultraviolet and metallic pigments, bioluminescence, and acoustic amplification serve as visual, light, and sound cues. Shared pollinator systems, decoy pheromones, scent scheduling, and thermal management integrate with structural adaptations such as spirals, buoyancy, and camouflage, demonstrating a deeply interconnected suite of strategies. Through chemical, mechanical, acoustic, thermal, spatial, and visual adaptations, flowers orchestrate precise, responsive interactions with pollinators, competitors, and environmental forces, optimizing pollination, protecting reproductive resources, and maintaining delicate ecological networks. Each bloom becomes an interactive, dynamic participant in its ecosystem, using timing, structure, chemistry, and sensory manipulation to control energy expenditure, guide visitors, conserve pollen and nectar, protect seeds, and encourage mutualistic relationships with microbes and animals. Across diverse environments, from arid heat to aquatic surfaces, cliffs, canyons, and hidden microhabitats, flowers exhibit remarkable engineering, integrating aerodynamic design, buoyancy, thermal regulation, camouflage, spiral geometry, labyrinthine guidance, acoustic detection, microvibrational pollination, chemical signaling, and visual cues in ways that maximize reproductive success and ecological stability. This integration transforms each flower into a multifunctional hub, simultaneously a habitat, signaler, protector, and guide, highlighting the extraordinary sophistication of plant life as both responsive and proactive agents within complex ecosystems. By coordinating scent, color, thermal energy, petal movement, microstructures, chemical defenses, nectar flow, acoustic detection, and visual signaling, flowers interact continuously with pollinators and other organisms, ensuring efficient pollen transfer, seed protection, energy conservation, and ecological balance. Through these strategies, flowers demonstrate that even stationary organisms possess dynamic, adaptive, and interactive capacities, shaping behavior, reproduction, and survival in highly optimized, nuanced, and interconnected ways. Every blossom exemplifies natural ingenuity, transforming environmental challenges into opportunities through integration of structural, chemical, sensory, and temporal adaptations, while supporting multi-species interactions, regulating resource use, and fostering complex ecological relationships. Flowers achieve extraordinary precision and efficiency in guiding, rewarding, or deceiving visitors, controlling reproductive timing, and defending resources, all while maintaining aesthetic and functional beauty. From ephemeral decoy scents to intricate petal spirals, From thermal reservoirs to bioluminescent nectar, flowers demonstrate how form and function merge seamlessly to serve survival, reproduction, and ecosystem interdependence. Pollinator interactions are orchestrated through mechanical, acoustic, visual, chemical, and thermal cues, ensuring that pollen is transferred accurately, nectar is allocated strategically, and mutualistic relationships thrive. Flowers manipulate microclimates, wind currents, and buoyancy, shaping both environmental forces and animal behavior, while spatial structures such as ladders, labyrinths, and multi-chambered nectaries create guided pathways for visitors, enhancing efficiency. Camouflage, chemical defenses, seed armor, and wax coatings protect delicate tissues and reproductive structures from herbivores, heat, and moisture, illustrating how flowers integrate defense with attraction. Multi-species coordination, whether through shared pollinators or microbial partnerships, demonstrates adaptive negotiation, communication, and codependence in plant communities. Ultimately, flowers embody highly integrated systems where physical architecture, chemistry, sensory responsiveness, environmental manipulation, and timing coalesce into a coherent strategy for reproduction, survival, and ecological stewardship, transforming each bloom into a microcosm of evolutionary sophistication that continuously senses, responds, interacts, and optimizes in the pursuit of life, reproduction, and ecological balance. When a grazer passes, some flowers remain virtually invisible, relying on camouflage to continue their reproductive processes unnoticed, avoiding not only herbivores but also insects that consume petals rather than nectar, conserving energy and preventing damage, with patterns developing as petals grow through pigments arranged in subtle gradients and textures, effectively rendering the bloom a master of invisibility that survives by staying unseen. Certain species coordinate their blooming across landscapes, opening sequentially along natural paths such as streams, ridges, or meadow edges, creating a wave of blossoms that directs pollinators from one plant to the next, ensuring pollen travels across long distances, increasing genetic diversity, and reducing competition among individual flowers. All regulated by internal timing mechanisms responsive to small environmental variations in temperature, soil moisture, or sunlight, resulting in a coordinated journey that benefits both plant and pollinator. Some flowers produce petals that function like nets, interlacing fibers to create flexible yet strong surfaces that guide insects toward nectar chambers while simultaneously ensuring contact with pollen-bearing structures and protecting the flower from rain by breaking droplets into smaller amounts, effectively creating functional latticework from living tissue that enhances pollination precision. Other flowers adjust nectar volume dynamically according to visitor frequency, reducing production during periods of heavy visitation to conserve energy while increasing richness or quantity when activity slows, guided by sensory mechanisms detecting contact or pollen removal, balancing resource use with reproductive needs, demonstrating a rapid and precise response system mediated through internal chemical pathways. Certain flowers construct hollow petals acting as resonating chambers that amplify wingbeat vibrations from nearby insects, enhancing acoustic detection and allowing pollinators to locate blooms in dense vegetation where visibility is low, while also signaling the flower to prepare pollen or adjust nectar concentration. With cavity shape and thickness carefully tuned during development to produce acoustic effects perceptible to insects, but subtle to humans. Some species emit scents capable of traveling vast distances on wind currents, using volatile, light compounds that rise with warm air during the day or travel close to the ground at night, creating gradients that help pollinators determine direction, effectively compensating for sparse habitats and turning the bloom into a long-range beacon. Certain flowers remain dormant for years before blooming, storing energy in underground structures to accumulate nutrients and ensuring flowering occurs only under optimal moisture, warmth, and soil conditions, producing a sudden, abundant bloom that attracts pollinators efficiently, before retreating underground for further dormancy, a strategy that minimizes reproductive risk and maximizes success. Some plants produce large underground tubers that act as reservoirs of water, minerals, and energy, allowing blossoms to emerge and thrive under harsh surface conditions, fueling rapid stem and petal growth while remaining insulated from environmental extremes. supporting spectacular blooms after long dormancy and demonstrating how the visible flower may be only a small fraction of the organism supported by hidden root structures. Certain blossoms release mist-like aromas that remain near the ground rather than rising, designed to reach low-flying, ground-dwelling insects, concentrating scent in cooler air pockets or small hollows, creating efficient pathways for pollinator guidance while conserving energy by preventing rapid dispersal. Some flowers develop secret chambers that protect maturing seeds from herbivores, insects, and adverse weather, maintaining stable humidity and sometimes thickening walls or accumulating deterrent compounds, opening only when precise environmental triggers occur such as rainfall or warmth, transforming the bloom into both a reproductive display and a protective fortress. Serving as the first guardian of the next generation. A few flowers exploit surface tension as a pollination mechanism, producing tiny droplets of liquid on anthers that cling to pollen, facilitating its transfer to visiting insects, while other adaptations include microstructures that guide movement, labyrinthine petal pathways, multi-chambered nectaries, metallic or ultraviolet pigments visible only to specific pollinators, bioluminescent nectar for nocturnal species, and partnerships with microbes that stabilize nectar chemistry, produce subtle scents, or defend against pathogens, creating multilayered systems of interaction. Flowers may store solar heat in dense tissues to maintain warm microclimates overnight, enhancing pollen viability and providing shelter for insects, or develop wax coatings that reflect heat and prevent water loss in scorching conditions, while spiral petal arrangements follow precise mathematical ratios to optimize light distribution, airflow, and pollinator landing patterns, integrating aesthetics with functionality. Aquatic blossoms exploit buoyant air pockets within petal tissues and base structures to remain upright on water surfaces, maintaining display and reproductive accessibility despite ripples or wind, and adjusting internal air distribution as needed to preserve balance. Pollinators sharing strategies emerge naturally when multiple species bloom at different times or adjust nectar and scent output to maintain dynamic equilibrium, while decoy pheromones, temporal scent scheduling, and thermal regulation integrate with structural adaptations to ensure maximum reproductive efficiency. Through microvibrations that release pollen and lock and key interactions with specific insects, acoustic detection, scent gradients, temporal coordination, and mechanical guidance. When a visiting insect touches a droplet of liquid on certain flowers, surface tension pulls the droplet toward the insect's body, carrying pollen grains with it, and spreading them in a thin film that evaporates quickly, leaving the pollen securely attached. While some blossoms position these droplets along narrow channels that guide the movement with surprising precision, ensuring pollen delivery even in gentle breezes and allowing the plant to avoid losing pollen to wind or passive dispersal, effectively creating a finely tuned interaction between biology and the subtle forces of nature, where water physics becomes a tool to maximize reproductive success. Some flowers extend this ingenuity by creating entire microhabitats for ant colonies, building blossoms with hollow cavities or small shelters that emerge naturally during bloom development, in which ants find protection while simultaneously defending the flower from herbivores or nectar thieves, patrolling continuously, removing pests, and maintaining cleanliness, with the plant sometimes offering tiny droplets of sugary liquid to reinforce loyalty. In turn, ants may accidentally transfer pollen, creating a cooperative network that enhances pollination indirectly while providing security, forming a miniature ecosystem of activity around each bloom. Other flowers develop curled funnels in their petals that spiral gently, guiding pollinators along a rotating path toward nectar while brushing reproductive structures against specific body parts, narrowing toward the center to ensure precise contact, slowing the insect's journey without causing discomfort, prolonging visits, reducing the nectar volume needed, and transforming the bloom into a dynamic environment where shape dictates interaction flow. Some species produce temperature-dependent scents, releasing fragrances that shift character as ambient warmth changes, light and subtle in cool air, then converted enzymatically to richer, more potent aromas in heat, matching the activity patterns of pollinators, ensuring scent molecules are effective when insects are active and preventing wasteful emission when conditions would cause rapid evaporation, allowing the flower to communicate in a shifting chemical language orchestrated by temperature, Certain plants require lightning strikes to trigger growth, as electrical discharge alters minerals, enriches soil with nitrogen, and fractures compacted earth, signaling dormant seeds bury for years to germinate, taking advantage of freshly altered soil for root penetration, nutrient absorption, and clustered blooming, ensuring emergence occurs only under optimal renewed conditions. Demonstrating an intricate reliance on environmental triggers for reproductive timing. Some blossoms adjust their form after each pollinator visit, subtly changing petal angles, stigma positions, or nectar channel curvature in response to mechanical contact or pollen removal, fine-tuning future visits by exposing untouched pollen or repositioning reproductive structures, creating a responsive architecture that allows the bloom to learn and optimize pollination efficiency continuously throughout the day, showcasing adaptive moment-to-moment evolution. Additionally, some flowers partner with bioluminescent microorganisms, whose chemical reactions generate soft light around petals at night, aiding nocturnal pollinators in locating blooms in low-light conditions, with the plant providing sugar or oils to sustain the microbes, forming a symbiotic relationship that turns the blossom into a quiet lantern, benefiting both organisms and enhancing reproductive opportunities in darkness. Many species employ precise petal geometry to reinforce structure against stress. Instead of flat surfaces, petals develop ridges, folds, or layered contours that distribute forces from wind, rain, or touch across the entire surface, preventing tearing or damage while maintaining functionality, with cellular growth patterns naturally creating these resilient shapes. Some flowers rely on surface tension to transfer pollen, creating tiny droplets at anther tips that adhere to visiting insects, spreading efficiently as they move and evaporating quickly to secure pollen, sometimes aligned along channels that maximize transfer accuracy, demonstrating the sophisticated use of physical principles for reproduction. Certain blossoms create net-like petal surfaces with interlaced fibers, forming flexible yet strong structures that guide pollinator movement toward nectar, ensuring effective contact with pollen-bearing organs while providing protection from rain by dispersing droplets. A living latticework enhancing precision in every interaction. Sequential blooming waves appear in some landscapes, where individual plants open in timed order along natural paths, directing pollinators through the habitat, promoting long-distance pollen dispersal, increasing genetic diversity, and reducing competition, all coordinated by internal mechanisms sensitive to environmental cues like light, temperature, and soil moisture. Flowers with hollow resonating petals amplify wingbeat vibrations from nearby insects, enhancing acoustic detection in dense vegetation where visibility is limited, alerting the bloom to prepare pollen or adjust nectar, with cavity shape and thickness tuned during development to produce effects perceptible to insects but subtle to humans, creating a communication channel via sound. Certain species emit long-distance scents, using volatile compounds that rise in warm air or travel in cooler ground layers, forming gradients that guide pollinators, compensating for sparse habitats and turning blooms into wind-carried beacons. Some flowers spend years in dormancy, accumulating energy in underground structures before producing a sudden, abundant bloom when environmental conditions align, minimizing reproductive risk and maximizing pollinator attraction, often returning to dormancy after flowering. Tubers act as underground reservoirs of water, nutrients, and energy, enabling rapid growth and survival in harsh or variable conditions, supporting spectacular blooms while remaining insulated from environmental extremes, effectively making the above-ground flower a temporary display powered by years of underground preparation. Mist-like aromatic emissions cling to cool ground-level air, guiding low-flying insects along intimate pathways with minimal energy expenditure, while secret internal chambers protect developing seeds from herbivory, environmental stress, or premature dispersal, opening only in response to precise cues to optimize offspring survival. Spiral petal arrangements follow mathematical ratios to distribute light and airflow efficiently, improve pollinator landing patterns, and integrate aesthetics with function, while buoyancy pockets in aquatic petals maintain upright orientation on water surfaces, balancing and adjusting internal air distribution to preserve stability. Thermal storage in dense petal tissues maintains warm microclimates overnight, safeguarding pollen and offering shelter to visiting insects, whereas wax coatings reflect heat and reduce water loss in extreme conditions. Flowers can produce metallic or ultraviolet pigments to attract pollinators selectively, and nectar chambers can be multi-compartmented to regulate feeding, conserve resources, and favor specific pollinator species. Decoy pheromones, cooperative pollinator sharing strategies, responsive shape changes, microvibration pollen release, and partnerships with microbes add additional layers of complexity, resulting in highly integrated reproductive systems. Flowers manipulate environmental forces such as air currents, light, and sound, combining physical architecture, chemical signaling, sensory responsiveness, and temporal coordination to optimize pollen transfer, resource allocation, pollinator guidance, and seed protection. Through these strategies, ranging from dynamic nectar adjustment, funnel-shaped petals, temperature-sensitive fragrances, lightning-triggered emergence, bioluminescent symbionts, surface tension-mediated pollen transfer, net-like petal lattices, sequential blooming, hollow resonating petals, long-distance scent dispersal, dormancy and tuber storage, mist-like aroma deployment, seed chambers, spiral petal geometry, buoyancy adaptation, thermal storage, wax coatings, and complex pigment patterns. Flowers demonstrate extraordinary sophistication, integrating structural, chemical, and temporal mechanisms to create highly adaptive, interactive systems that continuously sense, respond, and optimize in the pursuit of reproductive success, ecological resilience, and multi-species cooperation, transforming stationary life into a dynamic, finely tuned, and ecologically embedded strategy of survival and reproduction. Some petals contain overlapping layers that resemble tiny architectural beams, giving the flower unexpected strength while maintaining a delicate appearance, and these geometric patterns also influence how sunlight moves across the petal, creating brightness that attracts pollinators more efficiently. Because the shapes help maintain structural stability, the flower can remain open longer, offering more opportunities for successful pollination, transforming the bloom into an elegant combination of art and engineering, illustrating how natural forms develop principles of strong yet graceful design that humans often emulate. Certain blossoms communicate with pollinators through heat pulses, producing brief waves of warmth in response to vibrations or airflow when a compatible visitor approaches, activating metabolic processes that generate localized increases in temperature, which radiate outward in gentle waves detectable by touch or specialized sensory organs, signaling that nectar is available or pollen ready for collection, prompting insects to linger longer and improving the accuracy of pollen transfer. The thermal pulses fade quickly, conserving energy while creating a focused invitation, allowing effective communication in cool or dense environments where scent and visual cues may be unreliable. Other flowers produce nectar-containing compounds that function as natural medicine for visiting insects, including substances that reduce parasites, bolster immune systems, or increase resilience to pathogens, with the strength of these compounds sometimes adjusted according to seasonal conditions or environmental threats, resulting in healthier pollinators that visit more frequently, carry more pollen, and travel greater distances, turning nectar into a co-evolved medicinal resource rather than a simple reward. Protective curtains of scent around buds form in some species, releasing dense clouds of aroma that mask developing petals from herbivores and nectar thieves. These scent barriers gradually transform into inviting fragrances as the bud matures, timing protection and communication so that delicate tissues remain undisturbed while the flower reveals itself at the optimal moment. Large-scale coordinated blooming waves appear in certain species, with environmental cues such as temperature, moisture, and sunlight guiding sequential flowering across landscapes, creating rolling patterns of color that sweep over hills, fields, or forest understories, guiding pollinators along extended routes, ensuring pollen dispersal over long distances, reducing intraspecies competition, and providing a rhythmic, almost choreographed interaction between plant communities and their environment. Some flowers produce crystalline pollen grains with sharp geometric shapes, ridges, facets, or spines that adhere effectively to pollinators' bodies, reflecting light under magnification and in some cases interlocking with internal floral textures to position pollen precisely where fertilization occurs, demonstrating the role of microscale geometry in reproductive success. In moist or shaded habitats, Certain blossoms form gentle alliances with mosses and lichens, which retain moisture, stabilize soil, and enrich the local environment, while the flower provides shade and organic material, creating natural microcommunities where each organism benefits from the other's presence. Tiny reflective scales on petals produce sparkling flashes of light as the bloom moves in the breeze, signaling freshness to pollinators and helping the flower stand out amidst dense vegetation, while diffusing harsh sunlight, serving simultaneously as a beacon and protective mechanism. Hollow or concave petal cavities trap sunlight to create pockets of warmth, accelerating chemical processes crucial for pollen viability and nectar production, providing a microclimate that encourages longer visits from pollinators and shelters reproductive organs from cold breezes, demonstrating the functional significance of subtle adjustments in petal shape. Some species utilize slow-motion petal movements over minutes or hours to guide insects toward nectar, gradually curving petals inward to position visitors against pollen-bearing structures, and later adjusting pathways to encourage exit in a way that facilitates pollen transfer to subsequent flowers. Certain petals incorporate overlapping layers that act as miniature beams, offering structural reinforcement, while geometric ridges, folds, and contours distribute pressure from wind, rain, or visiting creatures, preventing tearing and maintaining stability. These structural adaptations allow the flower to remain open longer and provide repeated opportunities for reproduction. Other blossoms employ heat pulses or thermal signaling, generating brief, localized rises in temperature to signal nectar availability, creating an energy-efficient communication channel that works in low-light or densely vegetated environments. Some species adjust nectar composition to include beneficial compounds that act as medicine for pollinators, enhancing their health and encouraging repeated visits, thereby increasing pollination efficiency, while protective scent curtains shield immature buds from herbivores and opportunistic insects until reproductive tissues are ready. Rolling waves of coordinated bloom timing guide pollinators across landscapes, ensuring extensive pollen distribution and reducing competition between individual flowers, while crystalline pollen grains adhere more effectively due to ridged or spiny surfaces that interlock with pollinator bodies or internal flower textures. Cooperative microcommunities with mosses and lichens provide hydration, soil stabilization, and nutrient enrichment, with the flower contributing shade and organic matter, creating a mutually beneficial habitat, while reflective scales along petals scatter sunlight to produce sparkling flashes that attract pollinators and simultaneously protect tissues. Sunlight trapping cavities in petals create warmth that promotes pollen viability and nectar production, enhancing pollinator comfort and encouraging prolonged visitation, and slow petal movements adjust openings to guide insects precisely to nectar and pollen-bearing structures, increasing reproductive efficiency. Surface tension mechanisms enable precise pollen transfer through droplets placed along channels that adhere to visiting insects, while hollow resonating petals amplify vibrations for acoustic communication with pollinators. Certain flowers emit volatile compounds that disperse widely or cling to cooler air near the ground, forming scent gradients that guide insects efficiently, while some remain dormant for years, storing energy in underground structures to bloom en masse when conditions are optimal. Tubers act as reservoirs of water, nutrients, and energy, allowing rapid above-ground growth even in harsh environments, while mist-like aromatic emissions cling to the ground, creating focused scent trails for low-flying pollinators. Hidden seed chambers protect developing offspring from herbivory and environmental stress, opening only under precise cues for optimal dispersal, and spiral petal arrangements distribute light and airflow evenly, facilitate pollinator movement, and follow mathematical ratios seen in shells, hurricanes, and galaxies. Aquatic species develop buoyancy pockets to remain upright on water surfaces, adjusting internal air distribution to maintain stability, while dense petal tissues store thermal energy from sunlight to maintain a microclimate during cold nights, protecting pollen and sheltering insects. Wax coatings reflect heat and reduce water loss, UV pigments attract specific pollinators, and multi-compartment nectar chambers manage feeding, conserve resources, and favor particular species. Decoy pheromones, cooperative pollinator sharing strategies, microvibration pollen release, and partnerships with bioluminescent microorganisms further enhance reproductive success. Flowers manipulate environmental forces, air currents, light, sound, and integrate structural, chemical, and temporal mechanisms to optimize pollen transfer, resource allocation, pollinator guidance, and seed protection. Thermal pulses, medicinal nectar, scent curtains, coordinated blooming waves, crystalline pollen, moss and lichen partnerships, reflective scales, sunlight trapping cavities, slow petal movements, surface tension mechanisms, resonating petals, long-distance scent dispersal, dormancy and tuber storage, mist-like aromas, seed chambers, spiral geometry, buoyancy adaptations, thermal storage, wax coatings. Pigment patterns and symbiotic relationships collectively demonstrate the extraordinary sophistication of flowers, where structural, chemical, and temporal adaptations form interactive systems that continuously sense, respond, and optimize reproductive success, ecological resilience, and multi-species cooperation, transforming stationary organisms into dynamic, finely tuned, and ecologically embedded participants in their environments. With every aspect from petal microstructure to landscape-wide blooming waves contributing to a comprehensive strategy of survival, reproduction, and ecological integration. These slow, deliberate movements depend on changes in water pressure within specialized cells, allowing the flower to subtly alter its shape without expending significant energy, creating a controlled experience for pollinators that improves the accuracy of pollen transfer without startling or hindering the visiting insects. And each adjustment unfolds quietly and deliberately, reflecting a responsiveness paced to the rhythms of plants rather than animals. Flowers, often mistaken for simple decorations, are in reality intricate systems shaped by millennia of evolution, where every petal, fold, fragrance, and structural detail tells a story of survival, adaptation, and ecological interaction. The hidden brilliance of blooms reveals strategies that range from microscopic to landscape-wide, including complex geometry and petal spirals that optimize sunlight exposure and airflow, structural reinforcements through overlapping layers and ridges that maintain stability, wax coatings that reduce heat stress and water loss, and pigments that selectively attract pollinators while protecting delicate tissues. Flowers communicate through multiple sensory channels. Thermal pulses indicate nectar availability, chemical compounds in nectar act as medicine for pollinators, scent curtains conceal buds from herbivores, volatile molecules travel vast distances or cling to the ground, and acoustic resonances within hollow petals amplify vibrations from nearby insects. Timing is finely tuned. Coordinated blooming waves across landscapes guide pollinators, sequentially opening flowers ensure optimal pollen transfer and reduce competition, and dormancy periods allow plants to store energy in tubers or underground structures, emerging only under favorable conditions or after environmental triggers such as lightning strikes. Some blossoms employ physical principles to enhance reproductive success, using surface tension droplets to attach pollen to insects, air channels to carry pollen farther, buoyancy pockets to maintain upright positions on water, or slowly moving petals that nudge pollinators along specific pathways. Microscale adaptations include crystalline pollen grains that interlock with floral surfaces, reflective scales that sparkle to attract attention, and petal cavities that trap sunlight to create warm microclimates for both pollen and visiting insects. Symbiotic relationships further enhance survival. Bioluminescent microorganisms provide nighttime illumination, mosses and lichens create supportive microhabitats, and ant colonies protect flowers from pests while occasionally transferring pollen. Flowers adjust nectar composition based on visitor frequency and environmental conditions, shifting volumes, richness, and medicinal compounds to maintain pollinator health and ensure reproductive efficiency. Thermal storage in dense petals allows blooms to radiate warmth at night, encouraging early pollinator activity, while spiral arrangements distribute resources and facilitate movement, ensuring precise pollen deposition. Every aspect, from the architectural strength of petals to dynamic petal movements, from chemical signaling to ecological coordination, represents an integrated strategy of survival, reproduction, and multi-species cooperation. Observing these hidden systems reminds us that flowers are living, responsive participants in their ecosystems, each bloom an intricate blend of structure, chemistry, timing, and behavior, carefully tuned to interact with the environment and other organisms. The quiet sophistication of these processes encourages a deeper appreciation for the subtleties of nature, revealing that even the seemingly simplest blooms operate with intelligence and precision far beyond initial appearances. And through such understanding, we feel a stronger connection to the living world, sensing the complexity, patience, and delicate harmony that sustains life quietly around us, inviting reflection, wonder, and respect for the hidden networks of interactions that unfold at a pace softer than our own, where survival is achieved not through haste but through meticulous design, careful timing, subtle responsiveness, and intricate cooperation across countless forms of life. And in recognizing these hidden marvels, one cannot help but feel that the world is more alive, more interconnected, and more wondrous than it appears at first glance, as every fold, fragrance, pulse, and movement contributes to a dynamic tapestry of life in which flowers are both silent engineers and storytellers, quietly shaping and participating in the ecosystems they inhabit. And when we take the time to observe, even for a brief moment, the gentle orchestration of these processes, we are offered a glimpse into a profound narrative of resilience, adaptation, and interdependence, a narrative that unfolds patiently over hours, days, seasons, and years, reminding us that the smallest beings, through the simplest gestures, can embody extraordinary intelligence and design, and that by slowing down, breathing, and allowing ourselves to witness these hidden interactions, we become attuned to the rhythm of life itself, where each flower, in its quiet persistence and intricate beauty, demonstrates the remarkable capacity of nature to solve complex problems, optimize resources, communicate across species, and survive in an ever-changing environment, transforming every garden, meadow, forest, or pond into a theater of subtle genius, where survival is a delicate balance of structural innovation, chemical communication, temporal orchestration, and ecological integration. And in embracing this awareness, we are invited to slow our own pace, soften our presence, and recognize the ongoing symphony of life that surrounds and sustains us, appreciating that even in stillness, there is movement, interaction, and intelligence, quietly unfolding in patterns of light, scent, texture, warmth, and motion. And through this understanding, we see that flowers are not merely decorations, but active participants in a vast network of relationships. Each element, from petal microstructures to landscape-wide blooming sequences, carefully tuned to maximize reproductive success, ecological resilience, and the well-being of their pollinators. And by contemplating these hidden processes, we connect more deeply to the living world, realizing that beauty, function, and survival are intertwined in ways that are subtle, elegant, and endlessly fascinating, inviting reflection, respect, and wonder for the intricate artistry that is life itself.